Karen, I'm just going to do a little house cleaning, then I'll hand the microphone over to you.
Perfect.
Cool. Okay. Hey, happy holidays to everybody.
Likewise.
Cool.
Happy holidays.
Glad you could make it. Again, if anybody was like a +1 and you need to get credit for attending for certifications, let me just make sure I get your email address and your name, so I can add you to the list and get you credit in there. The first thing I want to go over with everybody is this is going to be the last meeting that we're able to host at this facility. Starting next month. Right now, we're either going to be hosted at KPMG right down the street or at USD. We've got USD booked and confirmed. It's just KPMG will be a little more centrally located for everybody. So we're kind of seeing how that works out. And that's why January's event's not on the calendar yet. We'll get it put on there. But what we're going to have in January, it'll be same third Thursday and same time, but it'll be the CISO from the city of San Diego presenting. And there's a new initiative that the city of San Diego has put out about a cyber awareness preparedness program that they're making available for the community. So that's what the topic will be. It just got introduced earlier this month. We found out about it through the Cybersecurity Center of Excellence. And I said, when can you present? And he said January. So really looking forward to that, but we'll get it up on the website so everybody can register. And I'd love to have you at that. Other than that, because we are starting a little bit late, I just want to hand the microphone over to Karen. Karen, are you in Illinois or Michigan at the moment?
I'm in Illinois.
Illinois, okay. Karen is with, and I'll let her introduce herself, but she's one of the people from ISACA Corporate. So with having the opportunity of what the new program is with the framework and everything, we wanted to have somebody much more familiar with it, help to explain it, and give you guys the best value. So with that, Karen, I'll send it over. If you have any questions, we want to make this as interactive as possible. And same thing for anybody attending online, just post a question in the chat and we'll share it with Karen. And for anybody attending online, about halfway through, we'll put a link to a Google form that you can fill out to get credit for attendance as well. Okay, other than that, Karen, the microphone is yours.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks, Dave, and the San Diego chapter for having me. My name is Karen Heslop. I am the Vice President of Content Development at ISACA Global. So my team is responsible for creating much of the thought leadership that comes out of ISACA Global. So that's things like review manual text. It's the ISACA journal. It's books, COBIT, white papers. And the biggest thing that we've been working on is the digital trust ecosystem framework. And that's what I'm going to talk to you about today. So here you see learning objectives. I'm going to fly by this. I have a lot of material, so please interrupt me. I will try to pace this correctly, but I make no promises. So I want to talk to you today about why digital trust is so important. And before I get into that, I'm wondering how many of you are familiar with ISACA's move towards digital trust? Do we have a lot of familiarity, some familiarity? And there's no wrong answer. I think people are muted. Some. I see some in chat. Okay. Well, hopefully after today's session, you're going to be a lot more familiar with digital trust and why ISACA has created a framework and why we feel it really is the future. So you all know that most organizations and individuals depend on digital products and services. In today's world, technology is ubiquitous and it's used in all aspects of our lives. I mean, financial transactions, social interactions, regardless of where the user resides. But if you think about it, many people and businesses overlook one crucial factor that enables technology adoption, and that is a sense of trust between the provider and its consumers. So, just as a high level, let's just take a look at a couple of situations where digital trust plays a critical role and questions that you likely ask. So, all of us wear a role at being an employee or an owner of an organization, but we're all also consumers. And if you're wearing your consumer hat, have you ever stopped to think about why you choose to conduct business with one company over another? Or stop to think about whether you're comfortable entering your personal information into a website? And I know with this audience, likely you do take pause when you're asked to provide information. I have a young adult daughter. I promise you, she doesn't, they ask her for information and she fires it off. Um, for us, and when you're making decisions for those questions, trust is a big factor. And now, if you think of yourself in your role as part of a larger enterprise, have you ever stopped to think, well, why do customers choose to do business with us? Or what is my organization doing to protect customer data, to make it safe to do business with you? And again, trust plays a crucial role here. I want to quote from an August 8th Forbes article. And the quote is, "To keep today's increasingly connected world free and secure, and to ensure that everyone may operate with privacy, the technology community, governments, and corporate boardrooms need to invest in digital trust." And many of you may have noticed that digital trust has become quite a buzzword these days. A lot of trade press will equate digital trust with simply cybersecurity. ISACA Global feels it's much bigger than that. The key to enterprise success in the digital economy depends on fostering trusted, meaningful, mutually beneficial relationships, interactions, and transactions. And as companies go through digital transformations and digital footprints expand, stakeholders are becoming increasingly reliant on emerging technologies. And, we don't always trust those emerging technologies. And yet, as consumers, we don't always know when a company is using some sort of emerging technology. So it's pretty obvious why digital trust is so important. And primarily that's because a consumer is much more likely to interact with a trustworthy company than with one they consider not trustworthy. And consumers also recommend um, products to friends and colleagues. And so if you're deemed a trustworthy organization, you're much more likely for your customer to do continued repeat business with you, to recommend you to others. And what's the result of that? Well, it's increased loyalty and driving increased revenue. And I know almost all of us, of course, are interested in increased revenue. Before I dive into the framework, I want to talk about a survey we did earlier this year about digital trust. 85% of respondents noted that digital trust is extremely or very important to organizations today. And 63% noted that digital trust is extremely or very relevant to their personal job role. Respondents also indicated the positive impact digital trust has on certain aspects of their organization. And that's what the bar graph in this slide shows. So you'll see based on respondents' responses, positive reputation was big, fewer privacy breaches, fewer security incidents. All digital trust led to those positive benefits. Despite that, only 66% indicated that their organization prioritizes digital trust in line with its level of importance. So we've got some work to do here. So when ISACA began down this digital trust path, this was about August-ish of 2021. What we did was we convened a small group of global volunteers to help us just talk through what is digital trust, should we do something with digital trust, and the overwhelming response was yes, ISACA should be looking at digital trust, and we think a framework is probably what is needed. And so before we started building a framework, we said, okay, look, let's define digital trust. What is this thing that we're trying to wrap our arms around and then provide guidance? So not surprisingly, digital trust starts with trust. And trust is defined as the assured reliance on the character, ability, strength, or truth of someone or something. Digital trust focuses on how trust manifests in a digital context. It's really an agreement between a consumer and a provider. And when I talk about consumers and providers, I think about these really broadly. Providers, as we use them in this definition, are intended to include suppliers or anyone offering digitally enabled products or services. Likewise, please think of consumers really broadly. Consumers includes customers, users, partners. Money doesn't have to transact in order to be a consumer in our definition. And I will tell you, we agonized over these words. And this is where we landed. So the ISACA, you'll see it on the screen. ISACA defines digital trust as the confidence in the integrity of the relationships, interactions, and transactions among providers and consumers within an associated digital ecosystem. And ecosystem is really big here. You'll notice that word's in the title of the framework, and I'll touch on that in a bit. This includes the ability of people, organizations, processes, information, and technology to create and maintain a trustworthy digital world. So when we looked at building the DTEF, ISACA really supports the establishment and maintenance of digital trust from all organizational stakeholder perspectives. I think oftentimes at ISACA, we tend to be focused very much on roles within IT, and we define, IT is pretty broad. You've got people that audit IT systems or information systems. You've got security professionals. You've got security management. You've got, IT risk professionals. You've got governance. You've got particularly privacy, but specifically the technical side of privacy. Digital trust is bigger than that. This framework covers an entire organization. So what are some of the areas that we don't normally think about when we think of ISACA? Well, marketing, for example, right? Marketing holds a company's brand. A company's brand is really impacted by digital trust. There's a huge culture and human factors component to digital trust. Who are sort of the leaders in an organization? That would be HR. So I just want to really paint this broad strokes. And why ISACA really feels like we are the right organization to come out with this type of framework is because we have so many of the disciplines that contribute to digital trust. I just mentioned two that really are part of digital trust. But there's so many others, right? There's the IT auditor, there's the risk professional, there's the governance professional, there's the security professional. All of those are elements to digital trust. So ISACA designed the DTEF as a holistic, dynamic approach for designing, implementing, and managing best practices to achieve and maintain the desired level of digital trust within an enterprise. It also recognizes that, especially today, a huge component, and this is where we get to the ecosystem, a huge component is, we rely on third parties to provide services, and those third parties rely on their third parties, and they rely on such. And so many of you work in an organization where you not only have vendors, but you have, third parties, fourth parties, fifth parties. All of those parties are part of your organization's ecosystem. So trust leaders in an enterprise should understand that implementing the digital trust ecosystem framework should really be part of their strategic goal to further the enterprise's digital transformation. It is not a quick fix solution to a broken program. Rather, it is a way to look at something holistically and iterate to create a program that will improve an enterprise's digital trust score, if you will. So let's talk about where this came from. When we were looking at how we wanted to architect it and what are the things that contribute to digital trust, the discussions turned around, trust problems they're often complex, they're dynamic, they change a lot, and a lot of frameworks are very two-dimensional. And being two-dimensional, they're very static. And the result of that is that enterprises view problems simplistically, or they can. That is straight line cause and effect. But yet the reality is there are indirect relationships, there are dependent transactions that really create the problem. So what the DTEF does is it looked and we based something on systems thinking. And by doing this, we acknowledge the interdependencies and the relationships among the nodes, or among the big things that really anchor digital trust. And so if you take nothing else from this presentation, it's understanding that we've created a 3D system that is all about relationships and dependencies. And so what systems thinking is, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, it explores how systems part interrelate. It recognizes that if you make a change here, it may have an impact over here. All right, I'm gonna just move along. Okay, so again to the ecosystem. You all know that no business operates in isolation. An ecosystem comprises a network of businesses and environments with interdependent parts. A trustworthy digital ecosystem includes enterprises that develop practices that enable other ecosystem participants to make decisions with a certain level of confidence. I'm just going to jump ahead and get right to the framework itself. So let's dive in. The framework starts at its highest level with nodes. So as I mentioned, the DTEF is a three-dimensional model which consists of 4 nodes and 6 domains. Right now we're going to focus on the nodes. So it addresses IT's 3 traditional elements, right? People, process, and technology. And it adds a 4th, and that is organization. You may wonder, well, where's information, right? We're all information technology professionals. That's a big miss. Actually, it's not, because information underlies every one of the 4 nodes. So we're representing this model as a pyramid, as you can see on the slide. But I want you to imagine, and try to picture it 3D. I wish I had a video that could kind of turn it. Think about it turning, modeling, tipping. So it's not that processes is in the middle, it's just the way the picture looks, if that makes sense. These 4 nodes don't exist in isolation. the DTEF expresses the dependencies through its domain. So it's where the two nodes interact or intersect is we call domains. So this interplay creates dynamic relationships that we're able then to use to describe the complexity of today's highly interconnected environment. I do, I'm gonna, you know what, I'm gonna move along. Okay, so I'm gonna now focus on each one of the nodes. I'm gonna stop here and are there any questions so far? Okay. So the first node is people, and you'll see that people connects to the culture, emergence, and human factors domain. So what are people as defined in this framework? It includes the individuals employed or associated within the enterprise. It also consists of the organization's customers and consumers that establish digital transactions, interactions with the enterprise. It also includes numerous third-party relationships, so vendors and suppliers, and their vendors and suppliers. I think many of you, all of you, are familiar with processes. And as we use the word process in the DTEF, we define them as structured activities designed to achieve a particular outcome through an individual or series of consistently applied tasks. Why do enterprises have processes? Well, they're created to help the enterprise achieve their strategic goals. It's a fundamental element that functions as an attribute to help organizations organize the requirements to support digital trust. And as you know, a set of effective digital trust processes must span all aspects and areas of an enterprise. This node is a crucial element that will always influence other nodes and domains. Therefore, enterprises need to view processes holistically and not merely as the sum of their parts. Two really important key concepts in systems thinking that relate to process and other areas of the model are feedback and delay. Feedback is the function of sharing observations, concern, and suggestions among persons or divisions of the enterprise to improve both organizational and personal performance, right? It could also be input from customers. Process feedback loops must be, companies have to capture this feedback to inform and educate their workforce, to maintain the digital trust design. Feedback is necessary to help organizations adjust to changes and optimize their practices. So by integrating feedback into processes, enterprises can leverage the systems thinking approach to implement a comprehensive set of digital trust processes. The third node I'm going to talk about is technology. And technology refers to every system, application, code, tool, utility that could impact digital trust. And these are there's a lot of them, right? It's mobile devices, voice over IP, other telecommunications. It includes smart locks, smart cards, biometric access, RPA, AI, deep learning, camera, video surveillance. You get the picture. Although the range of technology is broad, the DTEF addresses pervasive technologies beyond the boundaries of the enterprise itself. So what am I talking about here? So these are web-based applications and data storage, access via public networks, peer-to-peer infrastructures, cloud. So the increasing variety of technology options leads the average consumer to maintain a broad definition of technology, encompassing everything from internet connected cameras and vehicles to home automation and smartphones. Um, Emerging technology and mass adoption create unique challenges in the digital trust ecosystem for both consumers and providers. And you all know this. As a best practice, organizations need to select technology based on its functionality, efficiency, how it improves the productivity of the overall enterprise. After a company or your organization implements technology, it must train staff to use different tools and monitoring utilities to verify that it functions appropriately or as intended. Additionally, companies have to view the secondary and tertiary partners' technologies and practices as an extension of their own enterprise environment. In other words, a weak link in an external process can be detrimental to the company's reputation and potentially diminish consumer trust. And if you think about it, that's exactly what happened in the Target breach, right? What really got breached, or how did they get breached? It was through the HVAC system. Well, the HVAC system wasn't the name in the trade press, going down. Their reputation wasn't harmed significantly. Target was the one that really owned that, even though it was a partner that was the weak link. Oops. Sorry, flying around here. So the one node that some of you may not be as familiar with because you're used to people, process, and technology, that we felt really deserved to be elevated was organization. Because it's where strategy happens. It's how the organization is structured as a whole and how that structure and strategy impacts people, process, and technology. And so the DTEF provides a view of how the enterprise's design and strategy affect the people, process, and technology. The DTEF defines an organization as the network of people interacting via process and technology. Primarily, organization comprises employees, contractors, and other permanent associates. But it also looks at the organization's relationship with its external partners, third-party vendors, consultants, customers, and other stakeholders. These stakeholders and these relationships influence the organization's goals for digital trust, and they help to measure the success and sustainability of the enterprise. So nodes, though, we have 4 high-level nodes. Nodes give way to domains. And, this is really where the action happens and the fun happens in the digital trust ecosystem framework. So again, the nodes really look at what happens when you think about how people and organization interact, or process and technology, or people and technology. Those domains don't exist in isolation. So changes to one node can influence all of the other nodes. And so those interdependencies are expressed through what we call domains. This is where we take a step back and thinking about that systems thinking. This is where we're showing that the DTEF is not static. It's not just a linear framework. The domains themselves actually interact with each other via a node. So if you look at the screen, direct and monitor connects to process, and process connects to enabling and support. So some change in direct and monitor may influence a process, which in turn is going to influence or require a tweak in your enabling and support practices. So I want to take a step and look at each one of the 6 domains. I want to stop here as well and just acknowledge some of you who may be longtime members of ISACA may recognize this architecture. We did leverage this architecture, just the architecture itself, from the old business model for information security, BMIS. That was a framework focused exclusively on information security. Obviously, digital trust is much broader than that. So let's look at culture. Culture is the intersection of people and organization. And the culture domain influences and is also affected by, again, organization and people. So the internal culture of an enterprise relates to the cultural impact on individuals. So the synergy between human resources and the organization establishes the foundation for corporate culture. Organizational culture is broadly documented. It's a broadly documented topic, and it has many published definitions. As used in the DTEF, culture is a pattern of behaviors, beliefs, assumptions, attitudes, and ways of executing activities. The word pattern is crucial here. Cultures are made up of individuals, but do not necessarily represent a specific person's demeanor, right? Because it's the pattern of behavior. The overall culture can influence both individual and group behaviors. And when you think about culture, there's really two layers of culture you should think about. First is the organizational culture. That's formed over time by strategy, organizational design, and people's behaviors at work. But there's a second layer in individual and societal cultures, which can be very diverse. The enterprise has to look at those societal cultural impacts as well. I mean, you may have a multinational company who has a division, I'm making this up, but a division in Germany and a division in San Francisco. And the culture, even though it's the same parent company, there are probably going to be very distinct differences in the culture between the two companies, right? Even if they're owned by the same parent. It's not simply just because of compliant requirements, right? But it's because of it's because of societal norms. Emergence. I think emergence is the hardest of the domains to understand. And I always, you're not supposed to have a favorite kid, but I will tell you, emergence is probably my favorite domain. But I think it can be often the most challenging. So emergence is the intersection of people and process. But people also contribute, as we talked about in culture. They also are a huge component of human factors. So really what we're talking about here is the intersection of people and process. And so when you hear the word emergence, you tend to think of things like surfacing, developing, evolving. In earlier business models, this was probably called continuous improvement. That's not what we're referring to in the DTEF. In the DTEF, emergence is viewed as the arising of new business opportunities, new behaviors, new processes, and other relevant items as people and processes evolved. So really, emergence they're really the unplanned event. So something's happening that you didn't anticipate. And so emergence is all about looking for signals to say, like a great example of this is you've implemented a new policy. But what you're finding after the rollout of the implementation of that policy is that your employees, or many of them, are not following the policy. So you have to be looking for those signals. That tells you something's going on, right? I've got either a training problem, there's something faulty with the process. Emergence is the place where you look for signals and try to use those signals to diagnose problems before they materialize into something big. Human factors. So human factors is the connection of people and technology. This is also, like culture, a very extensively documented field. This is where things like the science and understanding of human capabilities, ergonomics, design, UI, that all happens in human factors. Um, it's also where, if you're familiar with human computer interactions, HCI, that happens in human factors. So human factors analyzes how humans interact with technology and the development of tools that facilitate the achievement of specific goals. So within the DTEF, human factors is the connection, again, between people and technology. So this is, okay, I've got some new technology. How are my humans using it, right? That could be internally within your organization. I've rolled out some new tool and people aren't using it correctly. Or it could be customer facing. I've designed a new website, but now people can't find where something is, or they're very frustrated by the purchase process. Again, it's that human interaction with technology. We're moving on to enabling and support. Enabling and support is the interaction between processes and technology. This is the connection through which technology enables processes, and process in turn supports the deployment and operation of technology. In the absence of a balanced process that supports technology, IT solutions often fail to meet business objectives, and they can become liabilities. So some detective measures must be in place to recognize problems before they surface. Where supporting measures are likely absent or ineffective, in a weak enabling and support domain, you're going to have a liability. So in a strong enabling and support practices, a company that has strong enabling support practices, there are processes that support technology and, most importantly, align with business objectives. They balance the process and maintain equilibrium, right? There's not too much red tape, if you will. They use appropriate controls. They identify and comply with compliance requirements. This is the place where a company must generate the enterprise's desired ROI to meet its business objectives. All right, so direct and monitor is the intersection of organization and process. And this domain really translates existing governance concepts and measures in the organization node, encourages enterprise to meet their missions and goals, and establishes boundaries and process level controls. That would be the process part of the node. So this node is called direct and monitor. For those of you who know COBIT, you're going to be very familiar with this. You'll see a lot of COBIT in the direct and monitor. It's really governance processes. It's really, it means that senior management sets the organizational direction required to manage the process. So this encompasses all tactical activities required to achieve the enterprise's strategy. Your typical governing practices will be found here. All right. Our last domain is architecture, which is the intersection of organization and technology. And so a lot of times architecture is often equated with infrastructure, with dealing with security or IT. In the DTEF, architecture is much broader. The DTEF views architecture as beginning as a concept, a strategy, a set of design objectives that an enterprise supports. And that the strategy and goals then progress to a model or rough approximation of the vision that creates the different building blocks, infrastructure that make up the enterprise, its interrelationships, and the principles guiding its design and evolution over time. Then in a typical, the way that DTEF envisions it, the enterprise would then prepare detailed blueprints and tools to transform that vision and model into an actual product that enables a standard, responsive, and efficient delivery of operational and strategic objectives. Finally, the building of the architecture itself is the realization or output of the prior stages. So these are things like you're defining objectives for complex systems, you're developing specifications, you're engineering and testing structures, you're monitoring and measuring, you're continually improving. Okay, so those nodes and domains are really important to understand about the DTEF, because if we're talking about architecture and infrastructure, that's really the scaffolding, if you will. Those high-level concepts are great, but as practitioners, you want something you can put into practice in your organization. And as such, the DTEF contains a lot more detail beyond the nodes and domains. So within each of the domains, there is a trust factor. Beneath trust factors are practices. Beneath practices are activities. Each activity has an outcome. There are KPIs and KRIs as applicable for each activity. So the trust factors are really the essential actionable ingredients to the DTEF that are required elements in furthering digital trust. A trust factor is identified by an abbreviation of the domain. So it would be, you'll see it on the next slide. So if we were looking at culture, the abbreviation would be CU. And then there's a numbering scheme associated with it. Within each trust factor, there are a series of practices. And each practice then has a series of activities. So there is a hierarchy to it. I think I'm kind of jumping ahead in my words. If you can look at the screen, you'll say the domain is culture. Within culture, there are 3 trust factors. And you'll see at the trust factor level, we've provided entity control. Each trust factor has a series of practices. And for the practices, there is a general control. And then each activity is broken out each practice has a series of activities. And then each activity has an outcome, KPIs, KRIs. We'll note a relationship of a particular activity to another domain. And we also indicate relationships to other trust factors. So why do we do that? We do that because if you think about the systems thinking, if I make a tweak to, if I'm looking here, to practice CU 0.0102, the change I'm making to modify the culture may have an impact on another domain or another trust factor, and I ought to look at that. So here's a link to the DTEF, and I can put this in the chat. And I think we have time. Do we have time, Dave? I think you guys are muted.
They're right now, yeah, and we do have some time.
Okay. So give me a second. Hold on 1 second. You can't see my screen, can't you? Like you're seeing a question, right?
We're seeing the slide.
You're seeing the slide. Okay, give
Oh,
me a
wait.
second.
Oh. And it shows like slide 29 of 30.
Yeah, okay. So give me 1 second. I am going to, let me see if I can, I'm going to stop my screen share for a second because what I wanted to actually demonstrate was the DTEF itself. Let's see if I can do this. And just a show of hands, has anyone seen this or taken a look at it yet?
Has anybody had a chance to?
No.
No.
Okay. So sorry, I have my screens reversed.
Gotcha. And I think I'm the only one that's seen it here. How many people here are ISACA members? Okay. If you log in, it's available under the resources, and it's not available for download. So you'll see it there as like an electronic book that you can read from it from there.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, give me a second.
And while she's doing this, what I was kind of following as it was coming up until they did a large webinar release introducing what it was and everything. And the most amazing thing to me about it was just how holistic it is of a framework on an organization. I'm so used to what does NIST say to focus here or to dial in on something. This really does a very good job of looking at every part of an organization and then being able to take those different parts and actually create KPIs and giving an organization metrics that they can measure on those particular things to identify if there's a big enough gap to work on and how to build upon it.
So can you see my screen now?
We're seeing your Teams chat.
Oh. Well, that's no good. All right.
Never said it's PT right.
How about now?
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. So as Dave was saying, you have to register to download the framework. But once you do that, if I can get my mouse to cooperate. It does not want to move over here. Sorry. Well, let's do this. Okay. So you see my ISACA?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So if I were to, once you get access to the DTEF, you'll go through like a purchase process, and it's free. And what you'll see, you'll download it, and it goes into the resources tab of my ISACA. So if I view it and I have it open in another tab, what you're going to see is it's in an e-reader. So you're seeing the cover here. I can scroll through, here you go about ISACA. You're going to see there's a table of contents. But I think it's easier to look at the contents over here. And so what you'll see is there's a lot of explanatory information, a lot of which I went over at a very high level today. So if we look at notes, you've gotten a sneak peek of notes. Here you go. You actually saw this figure in your slides. Actually, this is a little, here's the notes, right? So we talked about processes already. But what wasn't illustrated very well was what I like to call the framework proper. So we talked about the 6 domains. So culture, emergence, enabling and support, trust factors, direct and monitor, architecture. So if I open up, you'll see under architecture, there are 4 trust factors. If let's say I want to create the enterprise architecture, you'll see that the trust factor has a description. It's got entity level controls, and this one has a series of practices. Now, if I open up the practices, you'll see I've got a practice description, a general control, and then I have a series of activities. So if I open up the activity, bad example, you'll see that the activity is identify exceptions. The outcome is a list of exceptions is created. And then there's a series of KPIs and KRIs. And you'll see this particular activity really links more to technology. Sometimes they link very closely to both of the nodes. This one is more related to technology. And then it shows you relationships to other domains. And so the beauty of this layout is you kind of can, I can expand all. I'm going to reset it, but you can kind of just really poke around in it and get a flavor. And those expand and collapse allows you really to see the hierarchy. And so when we're talking about creating and managing a digital trust culture environment, well, what does that mean? It means here are 6 practices that contribute to that. And if I'm trying to establish roles and responsibilities, all right, here's a series of activities that will help me accomplish that practice. All right, with that, I'll open it up for questions.
Does anybody have any questions here? Go for it.
How does a person get started with this? It seems very interesting, but do you come in, Karen, or is there consulting, or how does somebody get started?
Yeah, so we're still really building out this program. And so we're really at the phase where we've, on a limited release, right, we haven't blanketed the public with, come use this framework, because we're not quite ready for it yet. But what we are ready for is for ISACA members to take a look, to read the framework, to start talking about digital trust, and really see if it's something you think your enterprise could benefit from. Early next year, we will have a board briefing issued on digital trust, and the purpose of that is really, okay, ISACA member, you're enthusiastic about the digital trust framework. Here are some things, tools and arguments and advocacy you can use to sell a digital trust initiative to your board. We're also working on a very interactive, we will have a 1-hour course, again, you can get CPE for it, coming out in February. In May, we plan on having a much more robust, immersive training on digital trust, and we are planning a foundations-like program, certificate program, so you can get training on digital trust. So that's the first half of next year. That will be followed by guidance on how to implement digital trust, guidance on how to assess digital trust, guidance on how to consult on digital trust. So we're building those programs out. We hope to have them out by the end of next year. We'll see how it goes. And then simultaneously, we are in the process of building what we call lenses for digital trust. So we are planning 6 lenses at least initially. For those of you familiar with COBIT, a lens would be analogous to the professional guides like we had in the COBIT 5 scheme or focus areas that we have with COBIT 2019. So for digital trust, we're building an information security lens, we're building a privacy lens, we're building a quality lens, a risk lens, a governance lens, an audit lens. And the idea behind the lenses is you get much more specific. So what we talked about today was the generic framework. But, let's say I'm in an organization and I just really want to apply digital trust, at least to start, to my security practice. The security lens of digital trust will get very specific into what you need to do in security to adopt or implement digital trust. Same with quality. So all it does is give you another level of detail. Importantly, what it does too, and I think the biggest value of the lenses, is they will give you controls at the activity level, which I think is huge.
Cool. A question I had for you is, and I don't know if it's built in now, but will there be content within the framework that helps to cross-reference against other frameworks?
Yes, so that's another thing we're working to build. So we're working on mappings to a number of other frameworks. So like you'll find, for example, those of you who are people very familiar with ITIL, you'll see a lot of ITIL in enabling and support. For example, like I mentioned, you see a lot of COBIT in the government, in the direct and monitor. So we are working on mappings from the DTEF to other frameworks, things like, NIST CSF, we're looking at ISO 27000. We have a number of them, ITIL, a number of them identified. Ultimately, the vision is we would be able to display all of this content on some sort of web platform or product, such that if you say, you know what, I already use COBIT and I assessed against COBIT, or I know I've implemented COBIT, such that you could say I've done COBIT, and then it would flag and say, well, you've already done this many things in the DTEF, or it would work the other way, for example. So that again is long-term vision. Mappings are coming. I don't have a release date to announce.
No, that's fine. I think
Okay.
it's just fantastic because it'll take people that are familiar with what they've been doing and give them something that they can correlate to.
Well, so that's interesting, because I'd love to understand from you all. I mean, how do you feel about this? Is it just like, do you have framework fatigue? Or is this exciting, or is it?
I got all types of fatigue.
Is that one of them? Yeah.
It's the holidays, I have a quick question.
Sure.
You mentioned the target breach.
Yeah.
I'm trying to wrap my head around this, right? So, which is kind of difficult to do at times. What part of your domains would have helped prevent the target breach?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm so glad you asked that question, because we didn't dive into the weeds, but I think this is really important for you all to understand. I talked about the nodes and the domains and the intersection of nodes and domains. But if you okay, so let's take something like, I'm not directly answering a question, because an easier example came to mind. But let's say you're looking at a security awareness program. So the security awareness program is going to happen in culture, right? But if employees are not passing that, the assessments for that security awareness program, or are avoiding taking it, that becomes a human factor. And so one of the challenges with having this three-dimensional model is it's not just you can find incident response in one location. It's going to be facets of incident response are in various places. So like let me share my screen again. If you if we look at the framework, for example, and let's take something like in incident response, right? There's a piece of this that is, resilience. And now I'm gonna try to, here we go. So there's going to be a piece of incident response potentially that's, in resilience, right? Managing continuity potentially. You're going to have another piece in enabling and support. Got to kind of dig down.
And after that, I think we'll
Here you go.
wrap up
Yeah.
just based on time. But go ahead and finish this thought.
And I think that that's one of the challenges, honestly, of this framework from my perspective. So what we are working on is an implementation guide that illustrates sort of how to look at the trust factors and look at a topic, and from the topic translate it into trust factors. And we are also working on online training, which will do the same and take you through a number of different examples. Does that help answer your question?
It did, thank you.
Okay.
Happy holidays to you.
Oh, thank you.
Cool, awesome. Just if anybody does have any other questions, I don't want to cut anybody off, but if we're good, I think this will be a good time to wrap, just based on the motion.
Thank you.
Cool.
Yes, thank you.
Karen, thank you. That was awesome. Totally appreciate your time and expertise and sharing everything with everybody. I know that we get we're kind of getting an early peek into what we have, and it was really exciting.
I will say, I just a couple of parting words. Thank you so much for having me. Happy holidays and happy New Year to all of you. And I highly encourage you to take a look at the framework and seriously reach out with any comments or questions you have. We're still building a lot of assets, so you have the opportunity to help influence what we do and how we prioritize it.
No, that sounds great. And we'll have you back like this time next year, and we'll see how far everything has evolved since today.
I will tell you that living in Chicago, where we're expecting snow this afternoon, I would really appreciate an in-person invite.
Oh, sure.
The document has an email address or a way for us to contact for any feedback, for any questions.
Did you hear that, Karen?
Yeah, so you can email me directly. I am heslop@isaca.org. Or email Dave and Dave can email me.
Yeah, you can email the chapter at isacasandiego@gmail.com. And also on the event page on the website is a link to Karen's LinkedIn account.
Yeah.
So anybody can connect with her directly there as well for any questions. Cool. Well, you are awesome, Karen. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, bye.
I'll follow up with you. Thank you.
Okay.
Take care.
Can I give you my?
I'm sorry?
Can I give you my?
Yeah.